Welcome back, everybody, to the Thrivestry Podcast, Mastering the Art of Thriving at Life, where we talk about creating change in our lives and in the world around us. I'm your host, Jeremy Jones, and I've got with me Gigi. Say hi, Gigi.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about improving the average, which is a term that Gigi came up with, and making small changes and only paying attention to the last few days and not trying to procrastinate on making a change in our lives, and trying to like really get too granular, too analyzing, which causes all kinds of side effects. And then the study that we want to talk about, or the article we want to talk about, is this: the vegetarian diet will kill you. I don't know. That's kind of a clickbaity headline, I think. But we're going to break that down a little bit and talk about kind of what the article was explaining and what we can learn from it. And we'll hit that one a little bit later. So let's talk about this concept that I have, and I'm going to have an article that goes along with this. And it's something that I've learned from just working with people, and a lot of the books and that I've read talk about, making these small changes. And I think, it could be improving your fitness, improving your diet, being better sleep, doing something better at work, spending more time with your family, or, your social circles, all these little areas where we can create change. And usually some people want to improve. And if you were to list these 5 or 6 categories for yourself, you're probably only going to want to focus on a couple of them, but you could track all of them if you really wanted to. And the concept is we don't need to be super specific on saying I am going to go to the gym 3 times per week and blah, 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 and have all that stuff. It's good to have that as kind of a, general plan. But what I like to think of is you just need to think about the average of the last few days. It comes kind of from this concept of you are the average of the 10 closest people to you, which is kind of a common phrase. I don't know if I'm paraphrasing that, but I like to think that you are kind of the average. Where you're going to be in 1 year or 10 years can be somewhat predicted by how you've been in the last 3 or 4 days. Are you getting a little plus sign on that characteristic every single day? How many minuses do you have? So for fitness, for example, it might be, did you work out? Did you go to the chiro? Did you go for a walk? Did you spend some good time practicing a new skill or working on mobility? Those would all be pluses. Minuses would be things like didn't do anything physical, sat for a long extended period of time, didn't slouched all day. Those are minuses. And then kind of there's the zeros too, the equals. You didn't really do anything good or bad. Maybe you just maybe you did a little bit of stretching. Maybe you did consciously try to sit up better and have good posture. Maybe you consciously got up out of your chair a little bit more. Those are just kind of neutral. And if you look over the last 4 days or so, and maybe today, how many pluses did you get and how many minuses did you get? And obviously you want to have more pluses than minuses. And it doesn't have to be anything more than that. There's going to be days where you have huge pluses and you did an amazing workout and you went to the chiro and all, it's still just one little tiny plus. But then you have really big negative days. But as long as we just think about over the last few days, you don't have to analyze it or write it down if you don't want to. Just think, did I have more pluses than minuses? And if you had a bunch of minuses, you need to say, okay, it's not a big deal, because it's only, even if you've had 100 minuses in a row, you're only worried about the last few days. And don't procrastinate on starting something new. Just be like, I'm going to do something. I'm going to go for a walk, and then, you know what? I know the next 2 days are going to be rough. So I'm going to try to, tomorrow, I'm going to try to do a little workout at home, before anything gets in the way, and do it early in the day, and then that way I get another plus. And you just try to get as many pluses as you can to outweigh the negatives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's kind of the difference between riding a fad or changing your life, right? You can't change your life overnight, but say you wanted to, I'll use something like a common example, right? A lot of people, when they want to get into shape, they say, I'm going to go for a run every day. I'm going to go for a run every day. Reality is that if you're going from not doing anything to doing something every day, it fails more often than not, just because it's not your norm, it's not your regular routine. The amount of energy that you need to kind of shift your entire life in that direction is a lot. And most people just don't have that willpower, that ability in your life to kind of drop everything and change. Just like
and then as soon as they fail, 1 or 2 days in a row, they just give up.
Right, exactly. But the reality is that say you're okay, for the next month, I'm going to go for a run every single day. And then you look back in the month and you're like, fuck, I only went once a week, and it's awful, and I thought I could do it, but 4 times that month is still more than the 0 that you did in the month before that. So you still, like, when you look at that average of your whole life, you're still improving like by increments, right? And I like even like a micro look at like 4 days at a time, right? And it's not this 4 days and then, days 5 to 8 and then days 9 to 12, right?
It's a rolling average, yeah.
A rolling average, right? So that's cool, because I know, like, we had 2 snow days this week. It's only Thursday. My kids, it's only the second day they've been to school this week, because it's like, which means that my workouts have suffered. It means like yesterday, after another full day of having them at home and playing endless games of life just over and over and over again, like we had pizza for dinner because I was fucking done by the end of it, right? But that doesn't mean that it's going to throw off. Like my Monday and Tuesday were pretty good, and Thursday today was great, and by Monday that Wednesday's already gone, right? And it's like, fuck it, it's already off the 4 days and it doesn't matter. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I like 4 day
Well,
rule.
and it's you can remember it, right? Like you can think back, today's Thursday, so Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, Sunday, and then you can go, okay, Sunday I didn't do anything, okay, that's a minus. Monday I kind of did, so that's a 0. Tuesday I worked out, so now you're kind of net 0 at this point. Wednesday I worked out, oh, I'm in a positive, and I should try to connect more positives. Obviously, if you can get positives, the longer the chain, the better, the faster you're going to make progress. But again, you also can't rest on your laurels either, so it's one of those things where, again, you do link a bunch of things together, but after 4 or 5 days, that kind of doesn't really matter anymore. Like you can work out every 5 times a week for 10 years, and you take a couple months off, and your fitness level is going to go way down, right? Mm-hmm. Or again, diet. You could have eaten clean and eaten really well for 10 years, and within a matter of months or even a month, you can be completely a different person. And so
I've done that, where you go on vacation, right, and you come back and you're like, I suck.
yeah. Well, and again, even on vacation, I also like the concept of kind of just like, again, just a super simple plus or minus, because on vacation, like I said, there's going to be all these minuses because you're drinking and drinking booze and eating all this tasty food. But if you can try to like, okay, well, like, I can make it a 0. Maybe you can just hold the ground by trying to eat some healthy stuff before you go have the big dessert or whatever, or try to eat a lot of protein before you drink a lot, or when you're drinking, try to drink less sugary stuff and just have more liquor. So yeah, I mean, you can make these decisions and to say, okay, like I'm going on vacation, I'm going to get a bunch of positives before I leave, right? And then when I get back, I'm going to try to link a bunch of positives. Part of this concept came from the nutrition stuff that's working really well, is this remote coaching that people get, or work with a nutrition coach, where you use an app like MyFitnessPal, and you put in your food, and it shows you your macros, your total calories, and how many carbs you ate, protein, and fat. And realistically, again, food is funny like that, where you have one bad day, or you have one bad meal, and then you're kind of like, well, the day's messed up, or I messed up the week. And it's the way the nutrition works, it's really just a rolling average. We talked about this in one of the other podcasts, where if you are going to have a bunch of bad food on Saturday, Thursday and Friday, you eat a few less calories, a few less carbs, and then you get a couple positives. You go completely off the rails and have a blast and have fun and enjoy yourself on Saturday. That's a negative. But you had 2 positives before that. And then you make Sunday a positive, and guess what? You're still on track. You're still making gains. But this applies to other aspects of our life too. If it's sleep, like, oh, I stayed up too late. Okay, well then this time, I'm gonna make sure I go to bed early tomorrow. And yeah, if you had a 2 or 3 days of really good sleep, and then you have 1 or 2 days of bad sleep, you're still probably okay. But it also makes you think about the next day. You can kind of steer yourself and make some plans to say, okay, I know tomorrow I'm gonna I'm gonna not have as much caffeine. I'm gonna deliberately turn off my electronics and go to bed earlier tomorrow. And you're more deliberate about that. You don't want to plan necessarily a whole lot out beyond that, except for maybe setting up routines. But in general, you can just think about the last few days and that rolling average, and don't let things from a week ago or more set you back. But then also don't let the the momentous life change that you're going for demotivate you, right? Just think about the last few days and think about today and tomorrow. That's it.
Yeah, I really like that. I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by like, I had a client, and if she ever listens to this, she'll be like, oh my God, that's me. So, but she would be like, well, I'm not eating sugar. I'm not eating sugar ever again. And I'm like, that's stupid. You should probably have some sugar like on Friday or like on your birthday, or I know you like tequila. So, but she had this like all or nothing mentality, and it got her so upset. Right. And it was just like, yeah, no, it's fine. I'm going to see this. She did all these like doctor's diets. Right. So like, oh, we'll give you all the shots you need so that you can diet properly. And I'm like, that should tell you right off the bat that this probably isn't a good choice. But anyway, so it would be like, yeah, no, I'm going to see him. It's fine. I'm just never going to have sugar ever again in my entire life, which is incredibly unrealistic. But like what is realistic is look at the last 4 days. Okay, you had sugar every day. So maybe instead of having sugar at every meal, have one meal that doesn't have sugar in it. That's an improvement. Next day, have 2 meals that don't have sugar in them. Next day, you're right back to sugar at every meal. Okay, you're going to go back to like improving a little bit, right? But you're still up because you still have those positives from
exactly
those 1 or 2 good choices. And even on vacation, like go for a walk on the beach. That's a positive. Go for a little bit longer of a swim than you normally would. That's a positive. All that stuff adds up.
Yeah, and it's the research says that when people are focusing on the end result, the end goal, it's very demotivating because people are looking at how much farther they have to go, and especially when you're stuck in the middle of it. So we're recording this at the end of February. 80% or more people have fallen off of their kind of New Year's resolutions because you kind of get into this dip where you put all this work in and you have so much farther to go, and it's really hard to be motivated when you're just looking at the peak of the mountain. And you still have to go up there. And instead of taking a minute back, the research says that when people are reminded about how much progress they've made, it's much more motivating to say, look how far you've come. That's why before and after photos are actually good, because you don't see yourself, the changes every day, but then you look at that photo from 2 months ago and you're like, oh, I totally look different, and it's much more motivating. This is why, in workout programming, why I deliberately repeat workouts that we've done 6 months ago or whatever. And it's not that we're trying to test every single day, but it gives you that data point and that little hit of dopamine that says like you accomplished something, you are better than you were before. And that keeps you motivated instead of saying, oh, but I'm still so far from doing this thing. And like I always say, I always use the analogy of like climbing a mountain. The mountain is where you're trying to go, and you kind of set your coordinates, but then you spend the rest of your time just taking 1 foot in front of that. You look down, so otherwise you're going to trip over all the rocks. And then occasionally you want to step back and look and see how far you've come. And don't keep focused on the mountain. You want to just keep focusing on the steps. And this is kind of the steps part, right? You're just looking at where you've been going and making some course corrections based upon the last few steps that you made. And the other thing you were saying with the other thing I was going to mention was how to implement this. So again, you could just create a practice around once per day when you're brushing your teeth or when you're driving to work. You just sit there and stop and say, okay, what have I done on this one thing or 2 things? But if you want to be more deliberate about it, you can actually use a journal or a calendar. It's really easy to just have a paper calendar, and you just write a little plus or minus, each day, and you'll know what that thing is. And maybe you have a couple of them. And you always just look back to the last few days. And then maybe you're like, hey, if I can get 10 pluses in a row, I'll celebrate, and so you can kind of reward yourself for that behavior. And so it's really easy to track that. Now, if you do use that, you can actually track more things. But again, sometimes when the tracking becomes so onerous, we stop doing it because it becomes like another thing we got to do. So you shouldn't try to make it too, and there probably are apps for this. I haven't done the research on that, but there is one called like Habit RPG where you have like a little role-playing game, and you have this little character that gets points as you put in what you're supposed to be doing, and then it pings you every day to put in your numbers, and then your character gets little icons and things. It's pretty fun. But I haven't used it in years, but it still pings me every night at 7:00. But it became a little bit more than I wanted to. I think I tried to like put way too much stuff in it, and it was taking all this time to fill out. And so And so it's easier for me just to focus on one or two things and be like, okay, I did good the last few days. I'm going to try to not break the chain. And then, I've done bad for a couple of days. I need to make sure that I do it today, or I do something tomorrow. Let's talk about that article that you mentioned. So why don't you break it down for everybody?
So I saw a clickbait article that a friend had posted. My mom's vegetarian diet is what killed her. Very serial killer-esque.
Wasn't she an author too?
But I don't know. I only read half the article. But
well, it was just confirming what you already knew at this.
Well, yeah, I think confirmation bias will only get you so far when you're interested in something. But so the whole concept was basically that whatever. So there's a whole, like, okay, without getting too far into vegetarianism, which is not really the point of bringing this up, it talked about the difference between obesity and all of the chronic illnesses that are associated with obesity, which are very well known, right? Cardiovascular disease, diabetes,
Cancer.
Obviously mobility, joint problems, cancer, exactly. But then there's another concept called overfat, which obesity is defined by your BMI, right? Your body mass index. But then being overfat is a completely unknown concept. And it's effectively like, on the outside, you'd look at it, you'd be like, oh, it's the same thing as obesity, but it's not. And it basically measures your, the ratio of like fat to everything else. It's not body fat percentage. As far as I could tell, it's slightly different from that as well. Again, I didn't read the whole article, but the whole point was that your BMI can be normal, so you wouldn't be classified as obese. But if you don't have enough muscle mass on you, you can still develop all of the same issues as you would if you were obese, right? Like your type 2 diabetes and your cardiovascular disease, but surprisingly the same mobility type issues, right? Because like, just because you don't have all the extra fat that's on your knee joints doesn't mean that your knees still can't weaken over time if you're not.
Especially the chronic inflammation, right?
Right, exactly. Chronic inflammation from having too much processed foods. Anyway, so this guy he's a cardiologist, and he had related the overfat phenomenon to vegetarian diets, because not only are they lacking in essential amino acids that we get only from meat, like veganism, but it was also that you're replacing that stuff with super highly, like, ultra processed foods that are really high in sugar. So not only are you missing on one side, you're also adding in all the really bad stuff.
I like to call them carbitarians.
Carbitarians?
I meet people that say they're like, I meet people who are vegetarian, they're doing it right. Like, they're eating a ton of healthy vegetables and they make sure they're getting enough protein. And like vegetarianism, the thing that galls me about vegetarians are, the ones that like, it's the healthiest diet, and it's just a diet, and it's an extreme. It's not normal for humans to eat plants only. And it is one way, and it works great for some people. But don't try to tell everybody that it's healthier than all these other diets. But then the other thing that really bugs me is when people talk about being vegetarians and like their meals consist of like bagels and rice and like chips and all these, like, and you're like, that's not healthy. Like, that it's highly processed, and it's tons of carbs and sugar, and it doesn't have protein and the healthy fats that you need. And those are the people that kind of end up with this condition you're talking about, aka skinny fat, right? People who they don't look like they're necessarily overweight, but they have such low muscle mass that it's put them at risk for these other conditions.
Yeah, a lot of alcoholics will have this as well, right? So they're not overweight, but because of all the alcohol and like the sugars from the alcohol that they have, they develop type 2 diabetes, and their body looks like and acts like someone who is obese, right? So there's lots of different ways that this stuff can be caused, but at the end of the day, you need to have a better balance, right? And it's not, if you're not moving and you're not working out and you don't have a good hormonal balance inside you, from whether it be like lifestyle or diet or just, I don't know, whatever else would cause that. That's basically it. Not enough sleep.
Yeah, well, I mean, that kind of encompasses everything, right? Like your lifestyle and your diet.
Yeah.
But another article that was kind of come up around the same time as this, it was just talking about how the vegetarian and vegan movement has been a boon for the food industry, and how it's such a huge moneymaker because they can sell these products to people who want to be vegetarian and vegan, and then all they're doing is processing it for longer shelf life and palatability. But it's not those companies don't have the health necessarily in mind, right? And so they charge a premium, and people buy that stuff because they want to be vegetarian or whatever, but it's not healthy, right?
Yeah, I think it comes from that you try to have normal foods that don't have that stuff in it, right? And you kind of saw the same effect when the war on fat, right? So it's like yogurt is good for you, but this is a fat-free yogurt. Okay, but to make fat-free yogurt, you're like super processing it. You've got to add in all kinds of chemicals like trans fats, or not, but like other chemicals, and tons of sugar, because without the fat, it tastes like garbage. So it's the same thing with veganism or vegetarian stuff. It's like, well, this is egg-free bread, or this is, I don't know, what's another example, like egg-free something. I'm looking around my kitchen like to see if there's anything, and there's only lemons.
These are egg-free lemons. We're gonna charge you more because they're gluten-free, egg-free, humanely raised lemons.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And again, it's a market. It's marketing, right? And it's not the healthy thing. The fat-free craze started in the 80s and 90s, and I grew up with that. It was all fat-free yogurt, margarine in the household, which we know now margarine was just chocolate of trans fats. And again, you have to think back, okay, what's really going on here? There isn't tons of money to be made from selling vegetables. And so there isn't a push to say, look, you should eat more vegetables. And, these are all the great health benefits. And they try to do that, like the, pomegranates are like the magical superfood. Yeah, that's the word. But the reality is there's not huge marketing pushes for these things. And so we don't eat them. But that kind of gives them a little bit, like, that should give you an idea of what you should be eating, things that aren't being pushed, crammed down your throat, no pun intended, that are probably healthy, just like, local meats and fish and eggs and lots of vegetables and, some fruit's going to be fine, lots of berries. But kind of in the bigger picture of what we're saying here is that clickbait title doesn't mean you shouldn't, like, vegetarians are all going to die, and it doesn't mean that there isn't a good way to be a vegetarian, and especially if you're doing it for religious reasons or other things, like, there is reasons why it's totally fine and you can make that work. But like I said, you shouldn't get sucked into this, vegetarian's the most healthy thing. Like, they always rank diets every year, 1 to 100, and like the paleo diet or whatever is always like considered unhealthy at the bottom of the list. And vegetarianism is like number 1 or 2. And they're like, well, you eat lots of vegetables and you don't eat all those bad fats and those bad animal products. And it's like, well, and you don't do that in the paleo diet either. Like, but it's too restrictive, and it tells you not to eat processed grains and gluten and things, and that's a healthy staple of the diet. And it's like, vegetarian tells you not to eat meat. Like, that's more restrictive. And so it's just funny how there's these public perceptions around the vegetarian diet. But again, when you guys see those clickbait articles, always go into it with a grain of salt. You can tell that Gigi said that she got about halfway through and realized, okay, what was interesting is about the difference between your BMI and obesity and this other version of being hyper fat. And so that was a really interesting concept. But at the same time, like you probably didn't need to keep reading, because it's like, oh yeah, I know all this. Like, this is, this clickbait article got me in, and then it realized, like, okay, it's just there's nothing really that new here. But yeah, so we'll end it here. You guys start thinking about your averages over the last 3 or 4 days. Think about, did you get a plus? Did you get a minus? Did you get just a push and go with a 0? And then try to start thinking about, okay, I need to get more pluses than minuses, and just keep it simple. And like I said, if you want to track it, you can use a calendar. You can just keep notes on your phone, but don't make it too hard. And also don't get too caught up, focusing on how far you have to go, and just focus on, now.
I just want to say one more thing. My favorite thing to do when I have a minus day is go to bed early. Because then I'm like, if I stay up longer, I'm probably going to have some more tequila. I might have a second bowl of ice cream. I might like, right? And then it's like, well, now I'm up late and I'm drunk, so I'm hungry. And, you know, so if you're looking back on the day and you're like, well, today sucked, just go to bed. And it's like a double because you're staying away from the bad stuff and you get a good night's sleep.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that can be solved just by going to bed earlier. Like health wise, I mean, everything. We all need more sleep, and just go to bed, you know?
Just go to bed. And that's it. We're done.
All right, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. Keep downloading, keep promoting this stuff to other people so we can get more listeners. If you guys have any more ideas, make sure you send them our way. So it's stuff that we can cover, you know, clickbait articles or science that seems confusing, and keep making change.